Hey, welcome back. We are in, I think, the sixth. No, I don't know how many episodes now. We're in chapter 3, starting in chapter 3, verse 1 today. And we're going to look at the first 9 verses. We're glad you guys have joined us. And if you hadn't, go back and look at the other episodes and get caught up. And we've been digging into the book of Galatians, and it's been a fun task. Last week we were talking about, Paul talks about the flesh here, and he really, usually when we hear the word flesh, we think evil, or we think of the fleshly things that we do, and we describe those as things that are ungodly and awful. And that's not what Paul is talking about here. He's really talking about the law when he refers to the flesh. And so if you cherry pick this stuff, you can really miss the context and miss what's going on. And so we kind of talked a little bit about that last week, and we're going to get into more of that this week as we dig in. Really, this whole segment is about 6 or 7 questions that Paul just consistently asks. And so Eddie's going to read for us today. You ready to read it?
Yeah, let's go
look at it in Galatians 3.
Galatians 3:1. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It was before your eyes that Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. Let me ask you only this. Did you receive the Spirit by works of the law, or by hearing with faith? Are you so foolish? Having begun by a Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? Did you suffer so many things in vain, if indeed it was in vain? Does he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you do so by works of the law, or by hearing by faith? Just as Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Know then that it is those of faith who are the sons of Abraham. And the Scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, in you shall all the nations be blessed. So then, those who are of faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith.
I saw 3 words that kept coming up through these questions. I saw the Spirit, I saw flesh, and I saw faith.
Yeah.
All 3 of these things are just talked about throughout this whole thing. And he's still being harsh, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'd say he's being harsh. I also saw foolish come up a couple of times.
That's right, foolish. I should have said that too.
Which is synonymous with stupid, but not in the sense that they are unintelligent. It's not that they're unintelligent. It's not that they're ignorant. We talked about it. It's more that they're not using that knowledge that they have. They know something that they seem to have forgotten.
I don't know if the people watching this would know the old show Sanford and Son, but that's what it reminded me of when we were talking about it earlier. You big dummy.
Yeah.
You big dummy. It's like he said, you big dummy. You're getting it wrong.
A little harsh.
A little harsh. And he goes on to even say, right here, this is why they're being big dummies, is Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed. And you were talking about that earlier, his crucifixion. What is he referring to there? You did a good job spelling it out as we were kind of prepping for this.
Portrayed in that, not that they were there, portrayed in that this is like painting a picture. And so in that, when the gospel was presented to them, it was presented to them in a manner that they could understand and see. That they could conceive of the fact that Christ was crucified. They could know how the gospel worked. They knew about faith.
And Paul knew this, and he refers to this because he's the one that shared it with them.
Right.
And so he's like, you guys were there. I've taught you this. I've told you this. The story was clear.
Yeah.
Yet you're being foolish.
Yeah.
Because everything I've taught you is neglected and thrown out, just thrown away, if you're going to lean back into the law.
Yeah, it's very frustrating to be misunderstood.
Yeah.
That's probably one thing that a lot of people get fired up about more than anything is just feeling misunderstood.
Oh yeah.
Or feeling like maybe you've laid out an argument that makes perfect sense, and then somebody just blows right by it over on the other side, and you're like, you didn't even think about the things I said, did you?
It happens to me all the time when I'm preaching. People will stop me at the door and say, "Good sermon, preacher," and they'll say a point that I didn't even make. I'm like, no, I didn't say that.
That's not what I meant.
That's not what I meant.
Yes.
That's not what I meant at all.
Maybe Paul's having that front door moment where they're walking out.
He's like so frustrated.
That wasn't the sermon. That's not the gospel. That's the law. Or the flesh.
That's right. That is not what you heard. That is not what you were taught. And yet, here you are saying the opposite of what I've been trying to teach you.
Yeah.
And so he gets into that. He says, "Oh, foolish Galatians," and then he uses the word bewitched. We talked a little bit about that. I don't know if, I think you looked it up. Is that used anywhere else in the scripture?
No, not that I saw.
I didn't see it either. I was like, but it refers to just evil, being sidetracked by evil.
Yeah. And again, strong language.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, he's coming at them. So whether it's just word variation he's using or whatever, he's coming at them with strong language, asking, you've been let off.
Well, what's harsh about this to me, and this kind of goes back to some conversation we had earlier, but right here with this one word, is when he calls Peter out, just a few verses earlier, when he calls Peter out, he basically says your hypocrisy is leading other people astray. He talks about misleading Barnabas and all of those things, because he's saying, no, you can't eat that, and he's like, yeah, we can. We're not stuck under the law anymore. And then he pulls them back into the Jewish laws and the customs. And so it's almost like, I hate to say it, but he's still calling Peter out here, using real harsh words. And I'm kind of a Peter fan, so it's like, dude, but I get it, because Peter was sidetracked, Yeah. And so.
And okay, so he goes on to speak about how this group that he is speaking to, the church in Galatia, began by the Spirit. And so you said there's a series of questions.
There is. I counted. I might have got it wrong. I thought there was 6, but I actually think there's 7. I can go back and look. But either way, there's just a series of questions. That's what the rest of it is.
Yeah, we talked about how when you argue, a lot of times when you're trying to drive a point, you ask questions you know the answers to.
That's exactly what's happening here.
And that's what's happening.
Yeah. One of the questions that stands out to me is right in the center. And I don't know if you wanted to talk about faith or foolishness again before we get there, but right in the center there's this question, and it says, having begun by the Spirit, are you now being perfected by the flesh? Again, he knows they know the answer to that, and he's saying, don't get caught up in the law, the flesh, which is still different language than I think most of us are listening, are used to hearing when it comes to the law. But that's what he's referring to. He's referring to the law as being fleshly, trying to do it yourself, versus what God has done for us through grace.
Right. He's
and the
drawing
cross.
a strict line between trying to work out a salvation and somehow make yourself righteous by doing certain things or abstaining from other things rather than trusting the grace.
And there's another side of that too that we may get into that in the next episode, but there's another side to it that the Jews tend to, and I'm assuming even today they kind of look at it this way: if you do this, God will do this. If you do these right things, God will do these right things for you. So it's almost like constant deal making with God. And our salvation doesn't work that way at all. We are undeserving, period.
Right.
We're all sinners. We're all marred with an attitude of sin that has caused this chasm between us and God, and we need Christ. You know? And he doesn't really get into the gospel here, except lets them know that you guys have been strayed. Y'all have strayed from the truth. And over and over again, he gives these questions. But that middle question kind of stood out to me. I don't know.
So what about Abraham? This
Oh,
reminds
yeah.
me-
Get
This
into
reminds
that.
me of Hebrews 11.
Okay, Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of
Hall of
things.
Faith, right?
Yes.
And so he's heading towards these Old Testament, call them heroes,
That's right.
you know, and the means by which they're justified, which is faith, which is faith, which is faith. And he goes back again here. We don't know if Paul wrote Hebrews or who wrote Hebrews.
Right, we don't know.
Storied.
Yeah.
But
I
this
think
is
it was
a very,
Paul, but we'll find out one day.
it seems very similar,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there's arguments about that, and here we are. It's just a similar strain of thinking,
It is.
you know. And so, how do we know that we're sons of Abraham? He's almost saying, like, you're trying to be Israelites. How do we know that we're truly in the family of God? Abraham had a promise that God would put a family under him that he'd call his own. How can we know that we're part of that family?
And just to clarify, that's the Jews, that's the Israelites.
Right.
And so there's this constant conversation too with the Gentiles are included in the gospel.
Right.
Throughout all of
The
this.
ingrafting
Exactly.
of the Gentiles.
All of that is woven into all of this passion that he's kind of letting loose as he gets on to the churches in Galatia.
It reminds me of the whole stump of Jesse analogy. Just, you know, David's father Jesse. It's like out of that stump that came out of David's family, out of the nation of Israel, God was going to grow himself really a kingdom.
A kingdom, yeah.
Yeah. And so, how do we know then that we're sons of Abraham? Is kind of the questioning. That, you know, God, foreseeing that he would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, in you all the nations would be blessed. So then those who are of faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith. Faith, 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 faith.
Which now
Not
includes
flesh.
Gentiles.
Yes, not flesh,
No.
not law, not what
It's
you
so
did.
weird to me that we put those together here. But I think we just need to reiterate that all the way through, because if we cherry pick this again, we're gonna miss some good stuff.
Yeah, keep reading the whole book again and again. We come back to that a few times, but reread it a few times over, because you begin to get the feel of the book.
And you can read it in just a few, I don't know, sit down 30 minutes, 45 minutes and read the whole thing, you know. So even if it don't all make sense, that's what this will help it make sense, I think, if you have some context.
Yeah.
So it's good to just go back and read. I think that's our time. We actually went over a little bit, but anyway, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Eddie, again for being here. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and the like button. God bless you guys. See you next time.